second that someone just invented a master blueprint. Literally a blueprint of virtually every bank vault, every power grid, and every personal email server on Earth.
Right, just a skeleton key for everything.
Exactly. And now you hold this blueprint. So the question is, do you release it to the public so everyone can, test their own security?
Oh, that sounds risky.
Right. Or do you keep it a closely guarded secret? Or do you just hand it over to the government and basically hope for the absolute best?
It really is the ultimate modern dilemma. And I mean, what's truly terrifying here is that we aren't talking about some sci-fi hypothetical scenario anymore.
We really aren't.
Yeah.
Because this is exactly what happened just a couple of months ago in April 2026 with Anthropic's new AI model, Claude Mythos preview.
Yeah, that release changed everything.
It really did. And today, we're sitting at this deeply historic intersection. It's June 2026. Anthropic is, well, they are hurtling toward a staggering $965 billion IPO.
Almost $1 trillion.
Oh. Yeah, $1 trillion. While at the exact same time, the U.S. government just dropped what basically amounts to a nuclear policy option, effectively shutting down foreign access to Anthropic's top models.
The stakes have literally never been higher. I mean, we're watching the collision of unprecedented technological capability, massive geopolitical panic, and just sheer unimaginable amounts of capital.
Absolutely. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore the defining tension of our time. Like, how on earth do we govern a technology that's evolving way faster than our laws, especially when there are literally trillions of dollars on the line?
It's the multi-trillion-dollar question.
Right. And we've got a fascinating stack of sources to help us navigate this with you today. We're pulling from recent news reports, the latest expert commentary from Gary Marcus, and some really detailed chapters from a German academic textbook.
Right, the one called Künstliche Intelligenz und Wir.
Yeah, which translates to artificial intelligence and OSS. And incredibly, we're also looking at a brand new papal encyclical titled Magnifica Humanitas.
It's honestly a surprisingly diverse stack of perspectives, which is exactly what you need when you're dealing with a paradigm shift of this magnitude.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
I want to start with the hard empirical facts of what Claude Mythos actually is, because the mechanism here is just mind-blowing.
It really is.
So when Anthropic developed Mythos Preview, they realized it had a terrifying capability. It could autonomously find zero-day vulnerabilities in critical software.
And for anyone unfamiliar, a zero-day is basically a security flaw in software that the creators don't even know about yet.
Right, meaning they have 0 days to fix it before it can be exploited.
Exactly. And we really need to be clear about how it does this, because it's not just, rapidly guessing passwords like a brute force attack.
No, it's way more sophisticated than that.
Yeah, Mythos understands the architectural logic of the software. I mean, it can look at millions of lines of code, spot a logical contradiction that human engineers completely missed, and essentially write a bespoke lockpick to exploit that specific contradiction. And the craziest part, it does all of this completely autonomously.
So it's a massive dual-use beast. Like, it can find the hole to help you patch it, or it can find the hole to let an attacker just walk right in.
Exactly. Defense and offense in one package.
And in response to realizing what they had built, Anthropic did something unprecedented. They didn't release it.
Right. They held it back.
Yeah. Instead, they formed this thing called Project Glasswing. This was a defensive coalition of about 50 major tech companies. We're talking AWS, Microsoft, Google, Cloudflare.
The biggest players in the game.
Right. And within just a few weeks of using Mythos defensively, this coalition found over 10,000 critical security flaws across major operating systems and browsers.
They essentially used the master key to lock the doors from the inside before anyone else could get their hands on it. I mean, it is a staggering achievement in cybersecurity.
It is.
But if we separate the empirical facts from the normative implications, meaning what they actually did versus what maybe should happen, it sets a massive, complicated precedent.
I completely agree. And I want to push back a little on the idea that this is just a pure win for society.
Oh, go for it.
Let's go back to that blueprint analogy. It's like inventing a master blueprint of every bank vault in the world. And instead of taking it to a global security council, the inventors just decide to form a private neighborhood watch club to handle it behind closed doors.
Right. Just themselves.
Yeah. So Anthropic looks incredibly responsible here on the surface.
Yeah.
But what are their actual structural incentive to hold this back?
That is the big question.
Especially if competitors like OpenAI are catching up, right? Are they genuinely acting as the saviors of the internet, or are they just building a massive competitive moat and trying to avoid the wrath of government regulators?
What's fascinating here is that tension is exactly what Chapter 21 of our German textbook source digs into.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the book systematically explores corporate digital responsibility, or CDR. It notes that voluntary codes of conduct are excellent for building trust at what the author calls the meso level of governance.
Mezzolup.
Yeah, which basically just means companies voluntarily going above and beyond their basic legal requirements.
Which, I mean, that always sounds great on a corporate press release, right?
Oh, it does. But the book points out the inherent limitations of this self-regulation. When you look at Project Glasswing, it is functionally a defensive cartel.
Wow.
And it's a group of massive private actors deciding what is safe for the world based entirely on their own criteria.
And that's exactly where the new papal encyclical Magnifica Humanitas steps in. Which, by the way, when I saw the Pope was weighing in on AI architecture, I thought it was wild.
It's definitely a unique source.
But his philosophical points align perfectly with the textbook's warnings.
They absolutely do. The encyclical warns against what it calls the technocratic paradigm. The text points out that private transnational tech actors now hold power that rivals or even exceeds that of nation-states.
That is a terrifying thought.
It is. The argument here is that relying purely on self-regulation means a few private actors, basically unelected engineers and executives, are setting the boundaries of human safety. And when power is concentrated in a few hands like that, it completely escapes public accountability.
It's the ultimate who watches the watchman scenario. So if Anthropic's Project Glasswing is basically a private cartel deciding what's safe, that massive concentration of unchecked power is practically an invitation for governments to just panic.
Oh, absolutely.
And the irony is, Anthropic's own CEO, Dario Amodei, actually agrees. Like, he wrote a massive essay recently, effectively begging the government to step in because he knows self-regulation isn't a sustainable structure.
Right. He recognizes that no single company should have to bear the burden of that decision indefinitely.
Yeah. So to really understand why Amodei is asking for regulation, and frankly why the U.S. government panicked the way it did, I want to take you through an alternate timeline, a counterfactual.
Oh, this is a good exercise.
Let's pretend that on April 7, 2026, Anthropic didn't form Project Glasswing. Imagine they just released Claude Mythos preview publicly on an API.
Okay, so total open access.
Right, meaning any developer anywhere could just plug this model's brain directly into their own rogue software with a simple credit card payment.
If that had happened, the 30 days following would have been just catastrophic. We can reconstruct this based on the empirical capabilities of the model.
What would that actually look like?
Technically, you would see an absolute explosion of autonomous cyber attacks. Bad actors wouldn't need a team of elite hackers anymore, right? They would just ask Mythos to discover and exploit 0 days in hospital power grids, municipal water systems, banking infrastructure.
And they could do this before human IT teams even notice the breach.
Exactly. Total technical chaos.
Which immediately bleeds into geopolitical instability. I mean, nation-states would obviously weaponize the model against each other, taking down rival infrastructure overnight.
Without a doubt. And regulatorily, the backlash would be absolute. If Anthropic had released it and caused that level of global chaos, governments worldwide would have slammed the brakes on the entire AI industry.
Yeah, there would be hearings, bans, everything.
It would have triggered immediate draconian legislation, basically outlawing advanced development altogether.
Not to mention the economic fallout. Anthropic's upcoming IPO would have been instantly derailed. The legal liability of enabling global infrastructure collapse would have bankrupted them in a week.
Yeah.
So holding it back was really the only logical move for their own survival, both economically and legally.
It was a choice born out of necessity, just as much as responsibility.
But the craziest part of the sources we read today is that even without a public release, chaos ensued anyway. I mean, Amodei wrote his essay practically begging for an FAA-style AI regulator.
Right, a central, technically competent authority to handle this stuff.
Yeah, but instead the Trump administration issued an emergency order through the Commerce Department.
The Export Control Directive, they just abruptly suspended all access to Anthropic's Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models for foreign nationals, even for Anthropic's own employees who are working overseas.
Gary Marcus was incredibly critical of this in his recent piece. He literally called it a nuclear option and described the policy as shambolic.
Yeah, it was a very strong reaction.
Yeah. And the backstory here is that the government apparently panicked after Amazon reported that Fable could be jailbroken.
Which is such a common occurrence.
Right. Now, for the listener, a jailbreak basically means tricking the AI into ignoring its safety filter so it answers dangerous questions. The irony here is that, like, a teenager on Reddit does that every Tuesday before lunch, yet somehow it triggered a unilateral federal shutdown.
And looking at this impartially through the lens of the regulatory landscape, Marcus points out that this move drew intense criticism across the entire political spectrum.
It really did.
Yeah, he cites conservative commentators like Dean W. Ball, who actually helped shape some of the administration's AI policy, criticizing the move. Ball called it inconsistent lawfare.
Lawfare, wow.
Yeah, he argued that the U.S. now essentially has a licensing regime for AI, but it's informal, opaque, and entirely arbitrary. Furthermore, the executive order the administration issued a couple of weeks later on June 2 was heavily criticized for being strictly voluntary.
Which means it demanded very little actual mitigation from the companies.
Exactly.
So it's totally reactive, shoot first, ask questions later, basically, as Marcus said.
That reactive stance is a distinctly U.S.-centric approach right now, relying on the market first, and then using blunt force ex post, meaning after the fact when something scares them.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this stands in stark contrast to the European philosophy, which Chapter 23 of our textbook breaks down beautifully. The EU AI Act officially enters its enforcement phase in August 2026.
Wow, that's right around the corner.
It is. And the EU approach is ex ante, meaning it creates a rule book before the fact, and it's heavily risk-based.
Okay, so how would that handle a model like this?
Under the EU AI Act, a dual-use model like Claude Mythos wouldn't be dealt with by a sudden, panicked export ban based on a jailbreak rumor. It would be formally classified under strict systemic risk rules from the very beginning.
So it's sort of the difference between building a comprehensive traffic light system with clear rules versus just letting everyone drive however they want at top speed and then suddenly confiscating all the cars when there's a massive pileup.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. Under the EU's article on systemic risks, Mythos would require independent audits, massive data transparency, and rigorous safety testing before it could ever touch the public market.
Right. The rules of engagement are defined clearly in advance.
Exactly.
But the global interconnectedness makes this whole thing so messy.
Right.
I mean, if you're listening to this and you work for a European company that built its customer service infrastructure on Anthropic's API, that sudden U.S. export ban isn't just geopolitical trivia.
No, it has real impact.
It means your servers could literally go dark overnight because of a sudden decision made in Washington, despite the EU having its own structured laws.
Unilateral actions in a globally integrated tech ecosystem almost always create massive collateral damage.
And the collateral damage gets infinitely more complicated when you introduce the massive financial elephant in the room, which is the IPOs.
The numbers are staggering.
When I was reading through the stack today, the numbers around these IPOs actually made me do a double take. Anthropic has filed for a confidential OPO targeting October 2026. The valuation, $965 billion.
Nearly $1 trillion for a company that was founded, what, in 2021?
Yeah, 2021. It's absolutely staggering. And their revenue somehow justifies the hype for investors. They are currently sitting on a $47 billion annualized run rate.
Which means if you take their current monthly revenue and stretch it out over a year, they are making $47 billion.
Right, largely driven by their enterprise coding tools. Meanwhile, OpenAI is racing them to the public markets, targeting an $852 billion IPO in the fourth quarter. It is literally an all-out sprint for the trillion-dollar crown.
That sheer volume of capital fundamentally shifts the gravity of the entire industry.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. This is the tension that actually keeps me up at night. How does going public fundamentally change the incentive structure for AI safety?
It changes everything.
Right. If you are a private company, maybe you can afford to hold back a super profitable model like Mythos. You only answer to a few venture capitalists who might actually share your long-term safety vision.
Sure, in theory.
But the second you go public, you have institutional shareholders demanding quarterly growth. How do you justify to Wall Street that you are sitting on the most powerful, lucrative software ever created and you just refuse to sell it?
It's the core contradiction of publicly traded tech, and the sources tackle this head-on. Historically, we can look at other industries where immense technological risk meets market forces. Think of the pharmaceutical industry, aviation, or nuclear power.
Well, that's a brilliant comparison.
In those sectors, the profit motive naturally pushes toward faster releases, fewer tests, and minimized costs. We've seen the catastrophic results when aviation companies prioritize shareholder returns and release timelines over basic engineering safety.
Yeah, we definitely have.
The thesis we really have to extract from these sources is that a publicly traded Anthropic is inherently worse for public AI safety than a private one. Market forces naturally prioritize short-term yield over long-term safety investments.
Almost unavoidable.
It is. The only thing that counters that pressure in aviation or pharma is stringent external statutory regulation.
Meaning you need an FDA, you need an FAA, you need the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. You can't just trust a publicly traded company to self-regulate when their legal fiduciary duty is to make money for their shareholders.
Exactly. And this is another area where the papal encyclical brings a really fascinating normative lens to the empirical facts. The text explicitly warns against the extreme financialization of technology.
What exactly does it mean by financialization in this context?
The argument presented is that when profit and efficiency become the sole, overriding measures of success, the technocratic paradigm wins out. It reduces human beings to mere cogs in a machine. Or, in the context of these trillion-dollar LLMs, it reduces us to passive data points that exist just to be extracted.
Right. The encyclical argues that social justice and human dignity have to be a precondition of tech design, not an afterthought.
Because you cannot bolt ethics onto a trillion-dollar machine after you've already turned it on and promised your shareholders a massive return.
That makes total sense.
The warning here is that if the market is left entirely to its own devices, it will naturally commodify human attention and prioritize the economic interests of a tiny global elite over the common societal good.
Okay, let me synthesize where we are. So what does this all mean? The market won't solve the safety issue on its own because an IPO fundamentally changes the incentives toward profit over caution. And on the flip side, reactive government bans like the Commerce Department's sudden block over a jailbreak, well, they just cause global chaos and disrupt the whole industry.
Absolutely.
So, based on the textbook's analysis and the current fallout, what is the actual path forward here? How do we build a regulatory model that deals with a dual-use beast like Mythos?
Synthesizing these sources, the most robust path forward appears to be a hybrid regulatory position. You essentially need to combine the strongest elements of both the European and American proposals.
Okay, I'm guessing that means taking the rigid rules of the EU, but maybe combining it with the technical muscle of a U.S. agency. How does that actually work in practice without suffocating the developers?
First, you adopt the EU AI Act's clear ex-ante risk classifications. You need a structured legal framework that defines exactly what constitutes an unacceptable risk long before the software is ever deployed.
So that gives the companies clear guideposts.
Exactly. Second, you combine that with Amodi's proposal for an FAA-style mandatory third-party certification agency in the U.S.
So like a highly technical, well-funded government body that actually understands the code.
Precisely. We need independent bodies evaluating these models, not the companies themselves trying to protect their trillion-dollar IPO valuations, and certainly not panicked political appointees making overnight decisions.
No, that obviously isn't working.
We need dedicated technical experts who have the statutory authority to look at a model like Mythos, test its zero-day capabilities, and legally mandate, this is too dangerous to release, it stays in the lab.
That sounds great in theory, but even if the U.S. and the EU hold hands and build this perfect hybrid system, Chapter 23 of our textbook points out some massive, gaping holes in global governance that literally no one has solved yet.
Oh, the governance gaps are the nightmare scenario for regulators.
Right.
The biggest one is transnational coordination. Suppose the U.S. and the EU regulate heavily. They pass the laws, they build the agencies, and they lock down their Mythos-level models. What happens when a well-funded competing lab in a country completely outside those jurisdictions develops an equivalent model and simply decides not to hold it back?
Then the master blueprint gets released anyway.
Yeah. If the rules aren't global, the risks aren't contained. And the second major gap the textbook highlights is the open source dilemma.
Oh, man.
How do you regulate open source AI models without completely crushing innovation and concentrating all the technological power in the hands of three massive Western corporations?
It's a huge problem because if a decentralized network of developers worldwide creates a Mythos-level capability and just releases it for free on the internet, There's no CEO to subpoena, right?
Exactly. There's no corporate server to shut down.
It's the ultimate game of whack-a-mole. You can't put the genie back in the bottle once it's on a million hard drives. And honestly, this is where that incredible metaphor from the People encyclical really ties this whole struggle together for me.
The encyclical uses two very distinct biblical images to frame the crossroads we are currently standing at with AI. The first image is the Tower of Babel.
The ultimate story of human hubris.
The text uses Babel to represent arrogant, uncoordinated, and limitless technological scaling. The builders of the tower wanted to reach the heavens using a single technology, driven purely by pride and ambition without any regard for the human cost or higher moral framework.
Wow.
And the result is confusion, fragmentation, and an inability to communicate. It represents the path of unchecked scaling where the technology ultimately masters the society that built it.
Which feels eerily similar to a blind arms race for a $1 trillion IPO with basically zero guardrails.
But the text contrasts Babel with a second image, the rebuilding of Jerusalem by Nehemiah. This represents a fundamentally different approach to technology and society.
How so?
In the story, the city is in ruins, but it is rebuilt carefully, step by step. And it's not built by a single autocrat or a massive cartel, but by the community working together. It's a collaborative reconstruction where technology and labor are actively governed to serve human dignity and the common good.
It's deeply intentional. It's not just move fast and break things, which has basically been the Silicon Valley mantra for a decade. It's moving carefully to build things that actually last and protect the people living inside the walls.
It perfectly encapsulates the difference between letting market forces and technology dictate our future versus actively, democratically governing technology to serve humanity.
Man, what a journey we've just taken you on today. We started with the terrifying empirical reality of Claude Mythos Preview, a model capable of hacking the world's infrastructure autonomously, and the quiet creation of Project Glasswing to lock the doors from the inside.
Quite a starting point.
And then we navigated the chaotic reactive panic in Washington, contrasted it with the structured ex-ante rulebook of the European Union, and stared down the looming shadow of trillion-dollar IPOs that threatened to permanently tilt the scales of safety in favor of quarterly profits.
It's a lot to process.
It is. And we grounded all of those moving parts in a profound warning about preserving human dignity against a technocratic paradigm.
It is arguably the most critical moment in the history of software. The regulatory and economic decisions made in the next few months regarding these frontier models will likely architect the internet, and by extension society, for decades to come.
It really makes you step back and look at your own daily relationship with this technology, which leaves us with a final lingering thought for you to explore on your own. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about governments, global regulators, and massive corporations deciding the fate of AI. But as these increasingly powerful models become deeply integrated into your own life, embedded in your phone, your workplace, your email, how will you ensure that you are actively using this technology as a tool for your own empowerment? How do you keep yourself from becoming just another passive data point in someone else's trillion-dollar valuation? Who really holds the master key to your digital life?
Yeah.